If you've been keeping up with internet drama recently, you may be aware that Pyrocynical is once again facing serious allegations, many related to child abuse. You can find the specific accusations on a document posted by an anonymous source, which I will leave in the description. And following its upload, Pyro made the following statement on stream.
I can't just go ahead and respond to it now. I need to now wait for all the YouTubers and everyone to jump in, and then I need to respond to it.
So now, it would be a good time to sit and wait for more people to pick up the story and for Pyro to respond so we can pick a side. But given his response to previous dramas and how the community reacted, I feel like I should point out something very important about how these situations played out and why I feel like the document could be doomed to fail regardless of the facts. Like and subscribe if you enjoy, and let's begin.
Me saying that you've been dating some like 14-year-old French girl and shit.
Keem is now trying to spread even more bullshit, saying that I'm dating underage girls. Now originally this alleged girl was 15, and now Keemstar has lowered the age to 14.
What we were talking about and doing was so far removed from actual sex.
There is a long history of degenerate, unjustifiable behavior from Pyrocynical.
To put a stop to it, like I put a stop to you and Pyro's relationship before it got to a point of statutory rape. Is that a true statement?
Yeah.
In mid-2016, a rumor started being spread that Pyrocynical was in a relationship with an underage girl from France. Keemstar heard of this rumor, and following an altercation he had with Pyro, decided to make it public. Note that, at the time, nobody knew much about the French girl, including Keemstar, who couldn't seem to decide if the girl was 13, 14 or 15. Pyro was very critical of this, claiming that Keemstar was lying about the girl's age on purpose to make the story sound more shocking, which, as we will later find out, is a rather ironic statement.
Now, if any of you didn't notice that, he just deliberately lowered the age. Now originally this alleged girl was 15, and now Keemstar has lowered the age to 14, probably to make it sound even more impacting and incriminating. And guess what? Later on stream, he lowered the age again to say the girl was now 13, and on top of that, basically insinuating that I was a paedophile.
Pyro also said that the whole story was some bullshit that Keemstar was making up to slander him over petty drama, and even seemed to imply that the girl didn't even exist in the first place.
And if that wasn't bad enough, Keem is now trying to spread even more bullshit, saying that I'm dating underage girls. Now originally this alleged girl was 15.
However, not much later Keemstar posted private screenshots of Pyro's conversation with a 14-year-old girl named Luan, where you can clearly see Pyro explicitly calling their situation a relationship, as well as using terms like leaving her, seemingly implying that they were breaking up. So it seemed clear that the French girl was real and that there was some merit to Keemstar's story after all, which led to Pyro making a response post on Reddit where he drastically changes the story but still assures everyone that there was no relationship between him and the quote-unquote 15-year-old girl, and that Keem is still the one in the wrong for purposefully lying about the girl's age twice. Following this, the situation was dropped by practically everyone until 2023 when Toastify made a video on the French girl where he was pretty much certain that Pyro, who had been nearly 19 years old at the time, was indeed in a romantic online relationship with 14-year-old Luan. However, since the video had a much bigger focus on other more concerning stories, the community didn't pay much attention to Pyro and he wasn't forced to respond. But that does beg the question, what's the verdict? Well, if you study the situation, you'll find out that no matter the angle at which you look at it, no matter how much benefit of the doubt you try to give Pyro, as of now, there is extensive evidence that Pyrocynical, at the adult age of 18 years old, was in an online relationship with a 14-year-old girl from France. He also stated multiple times that he was waiting for her to reach the age of 16 so that he, at 20 years old, could legally date her in person, which has obvious implications. Luan has made various statements claiming that to be true, and Pyro's wording in text messages completely corroborates that as well. And usually, when a YouTuber is caught dating an underage fan, they get pretty much kicked out of YouTube. So that makes you wonder, why does Pyrocynical get almost no criticism for this? If you go on any forum, any Twitter thread, any comment section regarding Pyrocynical's drama, you'll easily see that there's a lot of confusion regarding this topic, and a lot of people seem to think that the French girl case has been pretty much debunked, or that there was simply nothing relevant happening and no relationship in the first place. But how is that possible if the currently available information clearly shows that it's all true and that Pyro did date a 14-year-old girl? Well, the answer is simple. What happened in the French girl saga was very unclear and confusing from the beginning, and Pyro made sure to capitalize on it. When Kim first accused him, no one had ever heard of a French girl dating Pyro, and as far as Pyro knew, Kim had no actual way of finding out anything. So he said that the whole story was completely fake, and even went as far as implying that the French girl was not even real to begin with. Pyro was so confident that the story would never come out, that he even mocked Kim the entire video for thinking that he would ever be dating a 14-year-old girl. But when the private conversations were leaked, there was a drastic shift in the narrative, and suddenly the French girl was real, but she was 15 and they were never in a relationship, or sexual relationship as Pyro puts it. But even so, he was still happy to wait for her to become legal to initiate one. Again, this would be when she turned 16 and Pyro 20. So now, Pyro told two wildly different stories. First, he thought there would never be any information available, so he created a completely, laughably false narrative, which went as far as implying that the French girl was not even real. And then, when her existence and association with Pyro was confirmed, he grabbed onto whichever information was still unconfirmable, and now he says that the girl was 15 and that they weren't really dating. And since the identity of the French girl remained unknown for years, there was nothing that could be done to prove or disprove these statements. But 4 years later, in the year of 2020, Keemstar managed to contact Luan, who in an interview went on to dispute many of Pyro's statements. Firstly, she confirmed she was 14 and that Pyro knew she was 14 since the relationship occurred in 2015 and she had stated to be born in 2001.
He knew I was born in 2001, which would have made me 14 years old when it was 2015.
In his response, he said that you were 15 years old and he was 18. Why did he say that you were 15?
I have no idea. Maybe to make it less shocking? Maybe to make the age gap smaller by a year?
Secondly, she confirmed that they were indeed dating, unlike what Pyro said.
You know, he said that, like, you know, he never dated you, like that you weren't his girlfriend. But were you boyfriend and girlfriend?
Yeah, we were.
And finally, that Pyro only broke up with her once the rumors started in order to protect his image, which is something that we already see Luan referencing in the private messages dating to that event.
Why did you guys break up?
Well, when all these allegations came up, when either my friends or his friends wanted to make it all public, he came up to me saying that this won't work, that this will just, you know, make him seem like a very bad person, and he decided to tell me that we should just end everything.
So now, that's two Pyro responses where he's shown to lie and create the most convenient story based on what he thinks people can know, only for them to fall apart once more details become public. Unfortunately, the interview with Keemstar did not become popular enough for Pyro to respond to it. However, when Toastify's video released 3 years later, which went in depth on the French girl situation, people wanted Pyro to discuss it, and Pyro's friend, Colossal, said that they would discuss it on their podcast. But despite Colossal's promise, the topic wasn't discussed. In fact, the entire episode about Toastify's video was scrapped. And not much later, Colossal talked about a relationship on a podcast where he did confirm that Pyro and Luan were dating and that she was 14, but for some reason claimed that Pyro was 17 and reduced the whole situation to teenage love.
You interrupting me. I was right. Was he or was he not in a relationship with a girl that was, I believe it came out to be 14 at the time?
He was in an E-relationship. Nothing ever happened. Nothing ever occurred.
With an E relationship with a 14-year-old when he was what?
I don't think he's 14.
19?
No.
No, she was. I interviewed her. We got the correct age.
He was 17.
Yeah, that's right. He made
No,
it.
he wasn't. No,
He was 17.
he wasn't. She did have nice things to
You
say.
had jack shit. You couldn't make it about Pyrocynical, but you were desperately trying to.
The ages, clown. The ages.
Who gives a fuck? I mean, who gives a fuck? Nothing happened. They E-dated while they were both teenagers. Who gives a shit?
And lied.
So now that new information was available, the excuse that they were never dating or that Luan was 15 no longer worked, and Pyro would have to respond to the actual accusation with the facts laid out on the table. So what happens when Pyro has to face the situation head on with all the information available? He completely dodges it, of course. Mind you, it's not like Pyro didn't see it. He not only saw it, but he was set to discuss it on his podcast, as per Colossal's tweets. But the whole thing got cancelled, which means that someone in the podcast was against discussing the Toastify video, probably because it's impossible to discuss a video that makes it clear and obvious that Pyro dated a 14-year-old girl without looking guilty as hell, right? And you probably have realized it already, but Pyro is terrified of the French girl allegations, because he knows that there's no way around the fact that he dated a 14-year-old girl when he was 18, and that, as per his own admission, was planning to make it into a proper IRL relationship once she became legal. That's why he lied and created completely inconsistent stories until it became impossible to do so, by which point he simply started avoiding it. Not to say that Pyro can't give a new response that turns the situation on its head, but it's simply factual that he very purposefully twisted the situation as much as he could to protect himself. And this isn't the only instance of Pyro taking advantage of the available information and hiding the details of a story to avoid backlash. In 2020, Pyrocynical was accused of grooming an underage boy known as Ivory Rasmus. Most of you are already aware of how the situation went down, so I'm just gonna cover the key points. It started with a tweet by Ivory, which accused Pyro of grooming him, that got a very mixed reception. Pyro responded to it on Reddit and everyone sided with him. Then the YouTuber Turkey Tom made a document trying to highlight the issues with Pyrocynical's response and how he wasn't innocent. Despite the document saying that there wasn't enough evidence to call Pyro a groomer, the general public used it as proof that Pyro was a pedo. Following the document and a series of videos on Pyrocynical, Pyro made an exceptionally well received response video, where he tackled the claims in a very mature way, admitting fault when he had to admit it, but also making it clear that the most serious accusations just weren't true. The conclusion to take from Pyro's video is that the whole situation is in a grey area. Pyro and Ivory engaged in degenerate furry fantasy roleplay with each other when Ivory was underage. Pyro admits that he was irresponsible for not learning Ivory's age earlier, and that he shouldn't have continued the roleplay once he learned it. But that the conversations never went past regular furry roleplay, and that it in no way could ever constitute grooming. Well, and I agree with pretty much everything here. I think the Ivory situation is indeed in a grey area, where a lot of people are in the wrong, but it's not the grey area that Pyrocynical wants. It's true that it was never enough to claim Pyro was a pedo or a groomer, and I think that saying otherwise is a massive stretch which I don't endorse in the slightest. And know that I'm not here to drastically change the perspective on this situation, but with that said, calling the whole thing just furry garbage or embarrassing roleplay is a trivialization of what actually went on. Firstly, despite it not being in Pyro's response, it's somewhat known that NSFW art was shared between him and Ivory before he learned his age. And we also know that Pyro deleted all the messages after he learned that Ivory was 16, so there's no way of knowing what Pyro said to him exactly from that point onwards. But looking at the context and comparing it to old messages which are not deleted, it becomes obvious that Pyro continued to send NSFW images to Ivory after learning his age. In this first screenshot we can see that asking for thick is a way of requesting porn. Then, after the messages had been deleted, we can see Ivory asking Pyro for thick once again. While here we can see what seems to be an obvious exchange of porn between the two. And finally this statement by Ivory, where he says that Pyro continuously sent porn to him after learning he was underage. So Pyro was sending porn to someone he knew as a minor, but as he said, the conversations he had with Ivory were so far removed from actual sex that he didn't see a problem. But what about these messages right here, where they're outright discussing masturbation? Here, Ivory is talking about how he nutted to someone's sauna plenty of times. And following that, he asks Pyro if he ever nutted to his sauna. Obviously, Pyro's messages aren't here, but it doesn't take a genius to know what goes in between that question and the reaction of, wait, you did? God bless. So basically Pyro told a minor about masturbating to their character. And here's a conversation with Pyro's girlfriend, Ida, where she mentions that Ivory talked to Pyro about, quote, fucking in his mum's living room and such. And now in these screenshots, Pyro and Ivory are openly discussing their respective sex lives. It's clear from Ivory's reactions that Pyro is not shutting down the conversation at all, but instead engaging with it. A far cry from furry roleplay garbage, wouldn't you say? Furthermore, as the document correctly points out, one of the main talking points when the allegations originally surfaced was whether Pyro knew Ivory's age when he was 15. The accuser said that he had to know his age, considering that Ivory regularly mentioned it on Twitter. But, as Pyro said, he was suspended on Twitter during that time, and only one of those tweets was posted when he wasn't. So it's simply reasonable that he missed it altogether.
He never once disclosed the fact that he was 15 at the time these exchanges commenced. He didn't include his age in his bio until he was 16, but I was not on Twitter between the 28th of December 2016 until the 29th of June 2017, as I was suspended. It would have been a hell of a lot less likely for me to see all but one of these tweets that's been used as evidence in this Google Doc.
Pyro's wording about catching one specific tweet makes it seem like his suspension on Twitter would have somehow stopped him from seeing all those other tweets, which is not true at all. Here's 4 different instances of Pyrocynical using Twitter in a YouTube video in the time interval when he was suspended.
The only tweet I could find that had any relevance, guys, I go for a few days on Holy Day, so I can't upload. I'm sorry. Have a nice day, guys. Their bio says, lol, watch this. I don't know why. I think they got hacked and they were just like, nah, it's funny. Leave it. Lol, watch this. If you do it, I'll tell my mum and I'll get you suspended on Twitter. I think easily the worst thing about being suspended is the fact that you're almost locked in a cage. A cage with a nice glass mirror so you can see all of Twitter. You can't tweet anything, you can't post anything, you can't interact with anyone, you can't even see your DMs anymore, but you're allowed to see your notifications. And you know what happens when you get suspended? You will see brainlets, just absolute brainlets, arguing over a post you made like 2 years ago, mate. And they are still going to this day.
In the last one, he outright said that he can see everything happening. He just can't directly engage with it, contradicting the claim that only one of those tweets would have been realistically available to him. Now, this doesn't prove that Pyro knew Ivory was 15. It's still realistic that he didn't know. But it does prove that Pyro has, once again, taken advantage of missing or confusing information to craft his own defense. And the idea that his dynamic with Ivory never went past furry roleplay is another example of this. There are instances that prove otherwise buried within dozens of DMs that most people won't see or pay attention to, but Pyro was well aware that the conversations did go past furry roleplay and that they weren't far removed from sex, at least at certain points. And that's why I decided to talk about the Ivory case. because even if this information doesn't drastically change the verdict, its parallels to the French girl allegations are staggering. Both cases had plenty of confusion and uncertainty surrounding them, and Pyro made sure to use that to create toned-down versions of each respective story to make his response more acceptable. Pyro's dynamic with a 14-year-old girl is hard to justify. But what if the girl was 15 and Pyro 17, like Colossal said? Then it's just teenage love. Except they weren't even dating according to Pyro, so there's nothing to discuss even. And let's not forget that if the messages weren't leaked by Keemstar, we, in big 2025, would still think that the French girl doesn't exist altogether. We were also told that the messages with Ivory never went past cringe roleplay that was almost completely separate from reality. But it's clear that topics like sex and masturbation were brought up as well and flowed naturally into the conversation, which completely contradicts the somewhat tame version that Pyro told us. And that makes me very worried about the document, because Pyro managed to omit crucial information because it was buried in a few pages of DMs. So imagine what the guy can do when the information is spread throughout a 300-page document. And I unfortunately feel that a document which does have a lot of merit in certain sections is doomed to fail because people are ready to accept any excuse that Pyro crafts. Even before the document was released, the pre-excuses from his community had already started. Anytime anyone tries to take a closer look at the allegations, they say that it's recycled and it's already been addressed and Japanese soldiers still fighting 29 years after World War II and etc, when no, the allegations haven't actually been addressed at all. What has been addressed is toned down versions of the allegations that Pyro created to make his actions easier to justify. Because factually, as of 2025, Pyrocynical is yet to address the relationship that he had with a 14-year-old girl when he was 18. What he addressed were the quote-unquote friendly conversations he had with a 15-year-old. So when Pyrocynical fans bring up the Japanese soldier who kept fighting 29 years after World War II, kindly remind them of the 18-year-old British man who kept dating a girl 14 years after she was born. And if you've kept up with the drama, you know that for months Pyro's community has been digging into the past of the document's creator Pyro to find any incriminating information that makes him look like a pedophile so they can invalidate the document altogether. And I don't know if what they're saying about Pyro is true or not, but their point is, if all the accusations come from Pyro, who they are alleging is an even worse person, then they'll simply claim that Pyro is in no position to criticize Pyro. Basically, they are trying to turn this situation into a Pyro versus Pyro, but as a certified pedo hater and a neutral who has no attachment to either Pyro or Pyro, I say that in the hypothetical that they're both pedophiles, then simply kick both off YouTube? Oh, Pyro dated a 14-year-old girl when he was an adult? Good to know, now we can stop giving him attention and money. Oh, this whole situation created a movement that ended up proving that Pyro is basically the same? Great, so this drama brought attention to 2 alleged pedophiles instead of 1, and we can simply stop giving them both money. I really do not see the conflict of interest here, and from what I've gathered, there isn't enough proof to seriously accuse Pyro of that. But, whether that's the case or not, don't allow yourself to be fooled. This is not Pyro versus Pyro, it's us versus pedophiles. The bottom line is that Pyro is not the owner of the information. He's just a guy that found it and compiled it in a document. Any assessment about Pyro's behavior behind the scenes could be important and should be looked into, but the idea that it's somehow relevant to the Pyro case is just another desperate excuse created by Pyro's community, who have been living on nothing but cope and denial ever since the document released. That's not to say that Pyro can't give an amazing response that explains everything. I want to be very clear on this. No matter how conclusive a lot of things look like now, we 1,000,000% should give Pyro the right to respond. But even if he does give this amazing response, he's still gonna have to change the stories again, and add more details and twist old narratives, because as they stand right now, there's at the very least no way around the fact that Pyrocynical dated a 14-year-old girl at 18 years old. So it will have to be yet another instance of Pyro changing the story once its details become more clear. And if there's one thing to take from this video, is that if Pyro ends up responding to the document, we should pay very close attention to the details, because he's shown to be a manipulator who has no issue with lying to get out of these situations, and his past responses have thrived on public ignorance and confusion. This is not up for debate. This is not an allegation. It's something that Pyro proves anytime he has to respond to something. And remember, it's totally fine to be a loyal fan, but it's embarrassing to constantly defend a guy who has been lying to your face over and over. Thank you so much for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed.